The scariest experience of my life? No. This is the scariest experience of my life. So some elements of this story may seem suspect, but I can assure you everything is real. And then, slash four, some years ago, I was doing my master's in engineering at the University of Pennsylvania. Obviously, being pre COVID, I partied often. This led to me taking all sorts of drugs as I was experimenting at this point in time. Most drugs gave a good experience, some not so much. But this particular substance resulted in the scariest and strangest experience of my life. Here's my story. So I was sitting on the couch with a few friends, drinking beers and watching the TV. I was about to leave when someone I may have seen once or twice before offered me a pill. I wasn't sure what it was, but I kind of wanted to impress my friends, so I decided to hang around and take the pill. To my surprise, nothing happened. I must have been sat there for about 30 minutes with no effect. At this point, I decided to leave, and I'd asked around for the guy who gave me the pill, but apparently he left right after he talked to me, so I just went home. As the night went on, I decided to hit the hay, and I went upstairs. But as I was walking up the stairs, I heard whispers in the wall. This was weird as it was the outside wall, so no one could have done that. I was a little freaked out, but I shrugged it off. As I sit on my bed, I remembered I'd taken that pill. And just as I'd remembered, my whole room went blood red. And on the wall, in what looked like blood, was painted, "Rusty trombone is coming." I fucking ran right out of my house like it was on fire. I called a friend about my situation, and they let me crash at their place. I told them all about it, and they just chuckled, which I admit is something I probably would have done if roles were reversed. My curiosity grew as I sat watching Netflix, too scared to sleep, so I asked my friend if I could use his laptop. I vaguely remember my friend's parents talk about rusty trombone to each other when we'd eavesdrop on their conversations. At this point, I decided to see what this rusty trombone looked like, so I went on Google Images and Googled it. And to me, sheer fucking horror, the screen went blood red and appeared the message, "You're next." I threw the laptop at the wall and just ran. I haven't stopped running, alone at the campsite. Quality post. In the summer of 2022, I was desperate and frustrated. I had quit my job a few months prior in the pursuit of my own startup, and my business wasn't exactly thriving. After 6 years of IVF treatment, my wife had blessed me with a daughter early that year. And while I was elated to be a father, the stress of being a dad, the financial pressures from the clinic, and the weight of being the sole provider for my family had taken a significant toll in the recent months. And I found myself in a generalized depression that had been affecting me. As summer approached, I decided I needed a weekend away to clear my head and get back into the grind. I decided to take a 2-night trip, just me and our dogs, to a lake off an old logging road about 3 hours from home. It was one of my favorite spots, and I knew the woods there quite well. I packed my things, leashed the dogs, and set out early one Tuesday morning. When I got to the trailhead, the parking lot was empty. Middle of the week, I was stoked to be alone. There was a single deer path up a canyon about 1,200 feet over 5 miles to get to the lake. And neither myself nor the dogs met anyone else on the trail the entire way up the mountain. I got to the lake around midday, spent the afternoon fishing and collecting wood and water for the coming night. The lake was pristine and quiet, not a soul in sight. I was truly alone, aside from the dogs. I found a flat spot on the east side of the lake where the vegetation cleared, and I could set up a tent, and I made a small camp about 30 yards from the trail. I would have preferred to go further up the mountain, but it was still early in the season, and when I got to my campsite, the rest of the trail was too snow-packed to continue any further. As it was, I had to navigate over several hard, packed embankments before I got to a suitable area. The icy slush was difficult to navigate, even for the dogs, and when we had finally crushed our way over and through a few hundred yards, I made the decision we would be going no further. I set up my tent, hung my pack on a limb, and took my fishing pole back the direction I had come. I spent the evening catching and cooking fish at the edge of the spillway, and as the sun began to set, The dogs and I made our way back to the tent, slipping over wet stumps and clumsily pushing through the snow. I stumbled into camp, exhausted and ready for a fire. As I approached the site, though, I realized some things were out of place. My pack, which had been hung on a limb, was sitting neatly on the other side of the clearing, about 20 feet from where I had left it. Sitting on top of it was a large eagle feather. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. The dogs began a low growl, but as they circled the site, there was no one there. As I approached my tent, a stick had been used to carve an inscription into the dirt outside the entrance. It was "To Us," one upside down, connected to the other by a thin line, and then further connected by another line to a larger U shape. I would describe it as Native American petroglyph in the shape of a bird or an eagle, and started writing down with manuscript in the dirt outside the entrance. I was describing it as a slice of life, uniform, symmetrical, and above all things fresh. Someone had been here. Someone neither I nor two very distrusting dogs had seen, heard, or smelled. Someone who had left no footprints to the snow and mud. Someone who had not passed us on the trail, or whose car had been parked at the trailhead. My stomach dropped. I felt a presence of being watched, but I couldn't tell from where. I quickly built a huge campfire and with dread watched as the last of the sunlight sank beyond the ridge. Trio high. My fingers drummed around the base of the fire as I waited. That night was a fever dream. Pulling the dogs into the tent with me, I clung to my knife and flashlight, praying that whatever was watching me would leave. It didn't. Throughout the night, I was periodically awakened to a variety of sounds. Yells, shrieks, the snapping of branches. The dogs would sit up, growl and bark until I would open the screen of the tent and shine my light into the forest. At one point, I had just drifted off to sleep when the dog's low growl woke me up. Thinking I might have the drop on whatever this was, I slowly unzipped the tent and leaned out with my flashlight. Taking a breath, I clicked it on. Standing just 3 feet from me was a doe and her calf. I scanned across her. An entire herd was in the sight. As my dogs lost it, the deer spooked and sprinted back into the forest, a crushing and trampling noise as several dozen deer evacuated the area. As it faded, I heard laughter. The deep laughter of a man turned to crying as it escalated, then sobbing, and then to deep growling, much more boisterous than anything my dogs could make or even a bear would produce. I held the dogs tightly. Sleep eluded me for the rest of the night, and as soon as the sun peeked into the valley, I packed my things and left. I have never been so terrified in my life. Has anyone ever experienced something similar? It's been 2 years and I can't make sense of it. I need answers.